The US president is assassinated, but not in the White House. It happens in an underground city after the end. Instead of reporting it, the bodyguard keeps it hush-hush and locked down the presidential residence. The first episode of the new TV show Paradise is full of twists and turns, with an ending that'll knock your socks off. Xavier Collins lives in this picture-perfect city that looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale, but with a weird vibe. He's the head of the president's security detail, built like a tank and always on high alert. During his morning jog, he swings by the presidential pad. His colleague Billy's on guard duty and reports that last night was quiet. Billy's got a bad case of the runs, so he need duck out early. He's got Jane covering for him. Xavier's a single dad with 2 kids. His son James is chowing down on breakfast, talking about this cool book he's reading, James and the Giant Peach. Collins suddenly gets all quiet and broody. When Xavier gets back to the presidential digs, Jane's taken over guard duty. The agents inside report that the president hit the hay at 10 p.m. and still hasn't surfaced. Xavier's a bit puzzled. The president's not one to sleep in. He knocks on the bedroom door and calls out, but gets zilch. When he pushes the door open, Xavier's shocked to find the president lying in a pool of blood. His mind flashes back to the morning after the president's re-election. The president, all smiles and jokes, made a great first impression on Xavier. He was cool with protecting this down-to-earth leader for the next 4 years. The president, sounding sincere, says he's a straight shooter who just wants to do right by the country. He asks Xavier to have his back, even if it means taking a bullet. Xavier proves he's all in when, at a press conference, a fake reporter pulls a gun from a mic. Xavier jumps in without hesitation, taking a bullet for the president. After that, they get a bit closer.
Saying thank you feels kind of insufficient.
Saying just doing my job seems kind of lame.
So we'll just leave it there, huh?
Back in the present, Xavier checks out the crime scene. Empty glasses, an open record player, 2 glasses of unfinished wine, a cigarette pack, and a pair of earrings. Following the blood trail to the balcony, there is a half-smokestick cigarette. The safe's open with an empty black box in front of it. Xavier, who didn't even flinch at seeing the dead president, starts to panic. Instead of reporting it, he gives Jane an order.
Jane, I need you to quietly lock this place down for the next 30 minutes without asking any more questions.
Xavier calls Billy, who's still on the Jarn, cause he was on duty last night. When Xavier drops their emergency code, Billy knows something's gone south.
Again, it's about 30 minutes before Jane has to call it in, but when she does, Robinson won't let me within a mile of this place. It's really bad, and I need you here 5 minutes ago. Billy, you step into this thing with me, you could be entering a world of hurt. Promise. 5 minutes ago. Move.
Jane's itching to know what's up, but Xavier keeps her in the dark. He heads to the security room to check last night's footage with Garcia. They see the president having a spat with his wife, then getting cozy with another woman. Xavier notices her earrings match the ones in the president's room. The president has a couple of drinks with his dad, then heads back to his room with a third. The last person to see the president is Xavier. At 10 p.m., they have a quick chat before Xavier closes the bedroom door and leaves. Everything seems normal, but something's off to Xavier. When Billy shows up, Xavier takes him to check out the safe. The killer clearly knows the layout of the residence and has some serious access. He sends Billy to scope out the balcony area.
No photos, no notes. Mental snapshots of everything. It's the little things. Little things gonna matter here, Billy. Copy?
Copy.
Go.
In the garden below, Billy finds some trampled plants and muddy footprints on the path. Meanwhile, Garcia calls Xavier back to the security room with a new lead. After Xavier and Billy switch shifts, the footage shows Billy drinking Garcia's soup from the fridge and taking a 90-minute nap on the couch. Interestingly, the TV next to him shows a frozen image for a while. Garcia discovers that all cameras were offline from 10:42 p.m. to 12 a.m., explaining the frozen image. Billy, who was asleep, didn't notice. The cameras come back online at 12 a.m., and Billy wakes up a minute later. Garcia starts his shift after 1 a.m., so no one knows what went down during that hour and a half. There's some kind of vibe between Billy and Jane, but they're keeping it on the down low. Xavier tells Jane to report the president's death to the higher-ups. Soon, another team of agents takes over security at the residence. Xavier, being the last one to see the president alive, becomes the prime suspect. Enter Agent Robinson, the woman who was getting cozy with the president last night and the owner of those earrings.
I was wondering where you were, Agent Robinson.
Oh, I'm right here, Agent Collins.
She grills Xavier about his chat with the president in the bedroom. Xavier flashes back to last night. The tipsy president invites Xavier to stay for some music and a nightcap, but Xavier politely declines. The president then pulls out a black box from the safe, saying it contains the news of world, but Xavier stays mum. The president goes to the balcony for a smoke and asks if Xavier can forgive him for something he did in the past. Xavier gets emotional, talking about how his pregnant wife loved James and the giant peach and named their son after it. His voice shakes and his eyes water.
You want to know if I forgive you? I'll forgive you when I can sleep again. And I'll sleep again when you're dead.
Clearly, some decision the president made cost Xavier his wife, leaving his kids without a mom, and Xavier can't forgive him for it. Since Xavier wasn't at the residence last night, he's temporarily off the suspect list. Xavier takes off running through the streets. As the camera pans, things start to look weird. People use wristbands to unlock cars and buy stuff, and the ducks in the river are actually electric models. Even weirder, the whole river is fake. It's not even deep enough to cover someone's shoes. Xavier stops and pulls out the cigarette pack from the president's room, which has an X drawn in blood on the back. There's one cigarette left with a string of numbers on it. A nearby electronic billboard announces that tomorrow's sunrise will be delayed by 2 hours. Xavier's mind drifts back to a few years ago when the president, trusting him, let him in on a top secret known only to about 100 people worldwide to save humanity from an extinction-level disaster. The US bigwigs built a massive underground city beneath the Colorado mountains, the only place people could survive in the future. Xavier looks up at the sky. As the camera pans out, we see that the blue sky and clouds are just a giant screen, and the sun is just a super bright heat lamp. It's clear now that here is the underground city, with maintenance crews working outside the sealed space. And in this closed-off world, the president has been murdered. What secrets were in that stolen black box? What turned Xavier against the president? We'll have to tune in to future episodes to unravel these mysteries.